Christian parenting.
Welcome to the Living Wholehearted podcast. We are Jeff and Tara Mattson, a husband and wife team who is shrinking the integrity gap in our own lives and helping others do the same. I'm a leadership and organizational development coach, and Tara is a licensed marriage and family therapist.
We believe that if you have a following, you are a leader, and how you lead matters. Whether you are leading in the home, work, or community, we are bringing you biblical, clinical, and relational wisdom to help you in every relationship that matters most to you. None of us do this perfectly, but we are leaning into the reality of our humanity and profound wisdom of grace. According to a Pew Research survey, Americans are increasingly leaving organized religion, and millennials are leading the shift, leaving many young parents questioning their own faith and if the Christianity they grew up in with is really something they want to give to their children. Our guest today is a mother of two, and she uses her journalistic skills to explore what happened in evangelical Christianity that caused so many to be hurt or disillusioned, and the unexpected parenting dilemmas that arise due to shifting faiths. She shares her own parenting questions and dives into everything from should you baptize your kids and how to answer questions about what happens when we die, to moving past toxic purity culture and addressing racism and anti-LGBTQ plus beliefs that are in the church.
Well, our guest today is Bekah McNeel. She's the author of Bringing Up Kids When Church Lets You Down, a guide for parents questioning their faith, released in October. And Bekah is a journalist, a wife, and a mother of two, and her work has appeared in Christianity Today, Sojourners, Relevant, ESPN's The Undefeated, and elsewhere. So good to have you with us today, Bekah.
It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, you share openly that you grew up in a Christian home, began a career in ministry after graduating from a conservative Christian college, but after clashing with church leadership, you went through a time of questioning your own faith, being in that spiritual gray area that many people find themselves in their spiritual journey, and then believing in God, but rejecting the church system for a time. And then you had kids.
Right.
So talk about that journey, maybe where you were in your younger place, the time of questioning, what that looked like, and then how kids are starting to shape how you're approaching your faith today.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's such
a big question.
It is a big question, but it puts the whole journey. I think that a lot of times by necessity, we hone in on one little piece of it, and really it makes the most sense as an ongoing thing that's still happening. I'm still a person living in the world with questions, and my kids play a more and more active part in that. They're 8 and 6 now, so that's very different than when they were 2 and 4. And then I'm married to someone who's on his journey. And so we sit and talk about where we are now and what does that mean for everything. So this is an ongoing thing, and it helps me to think about it in terms of the whole process. So I grew up in a very conservative branch of the Presbyterian Church. It was very, very focused on right doctrine, orthodoxy. It was reform, like really, really into the Reformation. And the whole emphasis was on, as long as you can be really certain about these doctrines, then everything's going to fall into line and you're okay. And that's the main thing. And so it would then, that's hard to parent in that, I think. I think parents are like, okay, great, but what do I do with the kids? And so alongside that, a really complementary version of how to raise kids came up with lots of, here's how to keep them on the straight and narrow, here's how to set them up for spiritual success, and so it was really, but a lot of that came, upon looking back, a lot of that came from kind of a greatest generation version of spare the rod, spoil the child thinking, and I'm not here to entertain you. Like our parents had this very, those two schools of parenting that kind of went throughout the 20th century, the soft parenting and I don't remember if they used the word hard, but the more strict parenting, it leaned really heavily. Tough love leaned really heavily into that. And you see it in James Dobson, Focus on the Family, the Ezzos. There can be a lot of that emphasis on discipline and obedience rather than development and curiosity and creativity, encouraging those things. So that's how I grew up. And then basically the church had been my whole life. We were just really, really involved in our church. And the best way I could think of to please God was to go into ministry. So I went and got all this education, ended up with a master's degree in media studies, but still felt like, when I come back though, I'm gonna go into ministry. And, maybe I'll go to seminary once I figure out exactly what kind of ministry. And unfortunately, I'd had a really, really good education and was really based in inquiry and listening to people and asking good questions. And I found that those things were not welcome in the ministry context. And so when I would ask questions about why is our policy this way, or why did we make that choice, or why is that person excluded, I was treated as kind of like a hostile presence, and that just escalated into a lot of hurt. And for a while, the hurt was bad enough that I just didn't want anything to do. Like when people would use Christian-ish language, it was revolting to me. I didn't want to hear somebody, give all the glory to God for a good thing that had happened, or offer to pray for me if I was struggling, or stuff like that. I didn't want to hear Bible verses quoted at me. But I always I knew, and I talk about this a lot in the book, I knew Jesus had the words of life. I knew that when I looked at the gospel and I read about the life and the words of Christ, I was like, this is still it. I just don't know what to do with the people and the culture that's where it's available now. So I would go to church and I would just kind of hang out in the back. I would take communion, and I just got very isolated. And then in doing that, I kind of got to this little, I'm okay with this. Here's where I feel comfortable with the gray area. I need to know this answer. I don't need to know that answer. And then I had children and they have their own questions. And the balance between giving them security and giving them enough to build a relationship with God but not overly certain things that giving them certainty I don't have. And then I was also realizing how much that perfectionism and behavioralism had formed me. And so, because the funny thing about this evangelical certainty-based thing I grew up in was that how you raise a family was a big part of it. There was a lot of certainty based around what a family should look like, who should go to work and who should stay home, who should handle the discipline, what should we be disciplined for, all of that. And so I had to go inside and question some old ways of thinking that had stuck with me, while at the same time dealing with, the first time we had a relative who died, and the question came up, what happens when we die? Here it is, here's your doctrine of hell and heaven, and it's time to make a statement. And so that's kind of the overview of the whole, and that's a long answer, but that's the overview of my journey up till now. And I would say now is really more of this constant reconstructing of what do we believe now, and how does that inform how we live as a family and our relationships? And are there any old things still getting in the way, not because I believe them theologically, but because that's what formed my ability to have relationships?
Mm.
I can really relate to a lot of what you're describing. Growing up in a conservative evangelical church myself, and then and there's some beautiful things about the faith tradition I grew up in. I'm thankful for so much, but there was it's incomplete, imperfect, just like any tradition would be. I mean, and I remember someone kind of in my own journey and process. I remember someone saying, "Well, the church is imperfect the moment that you walked into the door."
Yeah.
And I just laugh at that because it's like, oh, that's so true. Like, I mean, we're
a bunch of human beings,
broken people
Right.
coming into a church system, and and so I really appreciate the thoughtfulness behind why do we do what we do here in the
Right.
traditions that we have, and so on and so forth, and what are sort of the preferences that we grew up in, that are where there's liberty, if you will, under orthodoxy, to have different preferences and freedom in respect. And I can so appreciate that. It's like I only knew because the pastors that I grew up underneath in that church system, as wonderful as it was, one example was just related to the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit was the great counselor and the third person of the Trinity, and that was it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, that's all I knew. And yes, those are two important things about the Holy Spirit, and from a biblical worldview. But there's more, and so you had more questions and there weren't answers. I just appreciate that connection, about that. That's it.
And Bekah, you're really naming, I think, for listeners, maybe the slowing down and normalizing that there's something that when we have kids that challenges us to really go underneath and not go through the motions, but wrestle. And you sounded like you were wrestling. Grad school does that. Education. And we find a lot of seminarians actually lose their faith along the way because we get so analytical about the humanity of everything.
Right.
But at the end of the day, something still drew you to Jesus. Talk about that piece. When you go, okay, I grew up in this human system, funky, but God's in it, and the gospel still speaks to me. Tell me today, what are the things you want to pass on to your kiddos when you go, but Jesus?
Right. There was a really important moment. So after I had my son, my second child, I was dealing with a lot of postpartum stuff, and I went, in addition to starting to go to therapy, I went to an intercessory prayer ministry that we have locally, and went and sat in this room. And I grew up super waspy, super like the Frozen Chosen is what they call it, just very rigid and not a hugger, not a hand lifter, that kind of stuff. But I go into this intercessory prayer room, and they put their hands on you and pray for you. And it's an interactive thing where they say, what are you seeing now? And when I say God is working on old wounds, what comes up? What do you see? It's a lot of that. It's kind of like this. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And
listening prayer type.
Yes.
Intercessory. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And it was one of the things I went to begrudgingly, thinking okay, we'll see. When do they pull out the crystals and stuff?
From your tradition, you were waiting for the crystals.
It was just this is one step above Reiki, and I don't know if my mother would approve. But at one point, they were praying, and the image came to mind of a stage and a backstage, and my life being lived on this stage of performance, of analytical certainty, of arguing, of debate, of being really sure. And then there was this image but behind the curtain, there's a heart, and that's been protected. And I really did, and this is a really nuanced point, and it's in the book, but it's really best in discussion, about the good that it did me to have an analytical thing going on and to be having all these debates and focus on that while I was in a system that didn't emphasize the Spirit, like you were saying, Jeff, that was like, yeah, God doesn't speak to you. Like, you ask me what God says and I'll let you know. And then we're going to go look up some systematic theology, cross references, and we'll figure out what God said. And so coming from that tradition, if that's what you're going to grow up in, it's pretty great. It was great to me, the idea of God doing something on God's terms and the Spirit doing a work that was happening. Because my parents had exposed me to the Bible, because I was praying and participating in all of this, but it was not happening and growing according to plan. It was not, in some ways, like what was happening on the stage was protecting what God was doing behind the scenes the whole time. And so,
when you say according to plan, you mean your parents' plan?
Right. Yes.
Or
my
the
own
church's plan.
Or the church's plan.
Your
They were all
plan.
one and the same.
Yeah. There's a lot of control in these environments sometimes.
A lot of control. Oh my gosh.
But God had something he was doing still.
Exactly. And so that's like when I wrote the chapter on the Bible and then the chapter on our relationship with education and the worry that a lot of evangelicals have about secular education. In both settings, like the the evangelical source of authority, and then maybe a more secular source of questioning authority, I wanted to emphasize that God is beyond our control. And that saved me because the God that I was trying to control and that the people around me were trying to control, and some of it was just human system stuff. And then there was some genuine, like, pretty harmful people who've been defrocked later. There was some pretty serious stuff going on. Yeah. And so being in that system and looking back and be like, oh, that's what was going on there. Okay, good to know. So being around all of that and just the control and some of the chaos in my own home, that it's just a really comforting thought to think about the Holy Spirit being beyond or more powerful than that, or able to work in spite of that. And I want that same thing for my kids, because I am a human parent. I am not doing it all right. And the most comforting thought to me is that they are being exposed and given in whatever imperfect way to a God that I don't control. I control their food. I control which school they go to. We try to encourage them to participate in family decisions as much as is appropriate and whatnot. But in the end of the day, I am in control and therefore crushed by the weight of responsibility for a lot of things. But it's so comforting to me that God and their interaction with the Holy Spirit is not one of those things, and that it is something that I have seen bring me to a healthier place than was ever laid out for me. Like, the path that I was given leads to a lot of anxiety, a lot of control issues, a lot of perfectionism. And I saw that the Holy Spirit had something else in mind entirely. And that's just a lot. That's comforting as a parent, because being a parent, I think we grasp at control because we're so scared of how much control we don't have.
Parenting is the greatest role in the world, and it's also the hardest. It's rewarding, challenging, heartwarming, and exhausting. Sometimes it can even be confusing.
That's why Christian Parenting is hosting their 5th annual Perfectly Imperfect digital event called Every Parent Wants to Know. They have some really great friends and experts who are sharing their insights, experience, and wisdom to give you the answers to questions we're all asking. Jeff and I will be talking to you about how to raise children with healthy sexuality.
Well, join us on April 14th for Every Parent Wants to Know, where we'll hear from a host of speakers on character, faith in your home, grandparenting, tough topics, and even a topic just for the parents. Each ticket is $49, and you can get access through the end of the year.
We'll see you there. And so you're speaking to kind of the extremes in the church body, capital C. So we have all those that are maybe in different church traditions, or maybe are outside a church culture and are just wrestling with their own walk with God and their spiritual journey as they're listening in. But I think about one extreme and the other extreme. One is, well, God is going to do whatever he's going to do. And so we just kind of ride the wave and we kind of go in and out. Maybe we aren't cognitive about understanding what the word says or our doctrine or understanding church history and the church fathers and all of how we got here. And that's not a part of it. It's just in a momentary ride the wave of life and emotions. And that creates a set of issues. And the other extreme is trying to hyper control it all with dogmatic, controlling responses. And both sides of our faith journeys often comes out of trauma. Those are trauma responses. Either I give up, I'm powerless, or I will never be hurt again over control. So you can kind of see how that shows up. And even how we infuse that with Jesus, where Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit never intended it that way. At the end, I'm hearing you say, Bekah, at the end of the day, I know I'm a flawed human who has to trust that God's got a bigger plan for my kiddos. So I'm going to kind of hold the both and.
Yes. I love the connection to the trauma responses, because I have thought so much about the hurt people continuum and been like, well, we have centuries of this, and we've been building institutions and doctrine on probably a lot of people's like parental attachment issues. And not entirely, that's being hyperbolic, but that those things come into the way we do church and the way we do theology and build institutions. And so I think that's such a good point, and trying to find the place of grace and secure belonging and saying, what does it look like to be here? It doesn't look like to be completely checked out and just like letting whatever happened. But it also doesn't look like being so invested in my input and my getting it right that I'm terrified if I'm wrong. And I think that's just it's such an important point, whatever you believe. That
wherever you're at in the process. Yeah. And control is a human piece of the equation.
Right.
And being secure and safe is a part of the equation. It's just how we go about that. I'm going to let Jeff ask a question because I can see he wants to ask one, and then I want us to get a little more practical.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that was coming to my mind. Multiple things are coming to my mind as we're sharing in dialogue together here, Bekah. Was just the what are some of the common factors? I think I wanted to ask you, what are some of the common denominators that you have experienced, but also are advocating for a more mature, and I'll even say this, a more mature, a more full, a more robust, a thriving,
holistic,
healthy, I'm going to put that word in there, holistic faith as a follower of Christ. So like that
we can pass down to our kids.
Like God. Yeah, that we can pass down to our kids. Like God, who can't be controlled. These are things that he, treasures that he's allowed us to find, and us, that it will help us to be, to not build and try to control things ourselves, right? So what are some of those common factors that come to your mind that you've been advocating for and that you're trying to practice in your life?
Yeah. Well, so as I went through the book, because I am a journalist, I'm not a theologian or a therapist or any of that stuff. But as I went through and talked to people and heard these stories and listened to what had led them away from a certain version of faith or faith altogether, and then where they had found peace, and listened to what had hurt and what had healed. A lot of what I came to was when we're super, super set on being right, certain, authoritative, when we are very like the authoritarian model, both of being like codependent, like needing an authority figure to tell you what you need, and exercising that authority in a very absolute way. If those are all the things that have hurt people and driven people away, then what we're looking for is a lot of curiosity. Like, I want my children to love God's world and ask questions about God's world in a way that is not anxious and afraid of crossing a line, like asking a question that dare not be asked. I want them to explore and really use their heart, soul, and mind to be part of God's world. A flexibility is another one. And as I was writing this, I was undergoing pretty intensive DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, and I talk a lot about being flexible. And so flexibility was on my mind, of just being able to say, I understand that this is an ideal, but what's possible for us right now? I understand that it would be great if we could do this, and I see the benefits of it, but can I be open to a different way? Can I be open to a different answer? And not that I have to accept it, not that I have to say, okay, never mind, I'm going to build my life around that. And I think you've seen a lot of deconstructing, like the ex-evangelical movement, running to a different set of answers with the same need for certainty, same kind of puritanical mindset, but running to a different set of criteria. And I think being more able to say, I'm going to consider something, I'm going to think about something, not argufy it, not problematize it, but I'm just going to think about something else that's not what I had originally thought was the answer, and see where that gets me. So that flexibility, curiosity, and then the idea of belonging, doing prioritizing the connection and the relationship beyond, above getting to correctness. I think because I was raised thinking that a right relationship with God was based in my head and based in having right answers and being theologically correct, my relationship with people was shaped by leading them, guiding them, pushing them, influencing them toward morality and this right thinking. And so there was just a lot of debate and lots of judginess, instead of prioritizing the relationship and letting that person feel and know love and security and curiosity from me rather than judgment. And doing that with my children as well, so that as they grow, the moment, when you grow up in the certainty-based system, every moment is the moment. It's like, oh, we got to get to orthodoxy right now because you could die. And then what? And instead seeing everything as an ongoing process and growth. And let's come back to that. Or what's the answer? What's the answer that we can get to now? And that might be enough for right now. And sometimes it's, can you be kind to that person? I realize that they're doing things you don't like and you don't agree with them. And can we be kind to them? And that's enough for right now. Before we get to well, you need to make sure that they understand that you're a Christian and you follow God.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if that totally answers your question, but the openness, flexibility.
Those are some good signposts that I'm hearing you say.
And let me connect the dot to the counselor.
Yeah,
so you're speaking beautifully about attachment and neural development and what the Lord kind of cleverly decided when he said, you love because I first loved you, and putting us as parents as the first experience for our children. Mm-hmm. So if they don't get the belonging and the sense that I'm going to meet you I'm a 44-year-old parent that's going to come and meet you as a 14-year-old girl and be where you are at, like God did in leaving his throne and coming as a little baby
right.
and entering our world. That's a grace it's what I would call a trauma-informed. I think God's the best trauma counselor out there. He meets us where we're at, and we watch Jesus go and meet each of his disciples. And whether he's with the adulterous woman or the Pharisee, he's meeting them where they're at and then taking the next step. He doesn't give us the whole game plan, right? And that's kind of what I'm translating in my own clinical mind. I sit with and go, child development wise, as parents, we are thinking you've got to have it all now and figure out how in the second grade recess, how to make sure that everybody's set right in knowing the divinity of Jesus. When really we're coming down to, where are you at right now? You need to be hugged. You need to be loved.
Yes.
You need to be listened to. And that's kind of the calling. I feel like coming out of your story, and many people have had this same story, have not experienced that attachment, that being known, the feeling seen, the belonging, the security of I'm okay where I'm at. And you're helping me grow, which is my bias on how God's scriptures speak to us. So I think I would be using different language, but I love it. Curiosity for the parent, like for keeping a culture where your kids can ask questions and affirm that, and being curious about the world. The flexibility. Jeff and I are learning a little bit about that and more, and like how we have a vision for our life, and then God throws a little wrench in there.
Yep.
2-year wrench.
2-year wrench. And we go,
what are you doing?
That's a big one.
I don't know. I'm very curious.
Exactly. I'm going to stay curious and not judgmental about this move.
I know. I'm not.
Yeah. And then the last one, what was the last one you said? So curiosity,
belonging,
flexibility, and belonging, feeling known and loved right where I am. Those are, I think, great signposts for a healthy system. That's not perfect.
It's not complete. There's more to them than there. Yeah. But those are some good ones, right?
I love it.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that come up when I'm talking to a lot of people about how they're hurt, like what they needed in response. And so I think the selection of those signposts probably tells you more about things that we're getting wrong in the church than all the things that we're getting right.
That's a really good statement right there. Yeah. And the felt needs from people that have been hurt and wounded by the church and spiritually abused. And this is a world that we've lived in for a long time. And so we understand we're on kindred hearts in there. It is complex. But, what's amazing is because God can't be controlled. I mean, in this way, as you just described, is that you saw him in your story still show up in ways that came outside of the frame that was defined, certain, practically, right? Yeah. We talk a lot about right motive and right method. When we talk about kind of parallel tracks, I use that really in a soft way because I'm not trying to introduce another frame that controls anything or anybody. But I just think this is so surprising and exciting, and to try to discern as leaders, no matter where we are and what we're leading, if it's a family, if it's an organization, if it's a business, whatever it might be. Church. Fill in the blank. That we get, where's our motives at? Is our motive, are we submitting ourselves to, if we say that we believe that God is uncontrollable and in control, he's in control of everything, but that he's good too. And then, where's our motives? Are we trying to get our needs met in unhealthy ways from another person right now, or a system, or people, or groups?
Or even our kids.
Or our spouse. And what is the method there? Now, motive is so important. I love it in the Proverbs, because it's wisdom literature, right? That all a person's ways seem innocent to them. Motives are weighed by the Lord. And that's it's an invitation to have desire like he would have. So stay curious. What is your desire for this conversation I'm going to have with this person today?
Right.
But what's the right method? And there's lots of methods that are out there. And that's why we have so many different churches, I think, trying to do so many different things. The methods are frames. But if the frames reduce God to something that we feel safe in and controlled, then that's the problem. And that's what I'm hearing you say. And so what's so beautiful is God, give us your heartbeat, your method, your motive for first and foremost for our ways of living and parenting and leading and responding. And let's stay, help us to stay humble. You're the one, your thoughts are higher than ours. So we're depending on you. And then, all the freedom to discover, even as we do this today in this podcast, hearing about how you do this. What's your methods that are seeming to give you some insight into your parenting your kids and other things. And we need all the help we can get on methods and living. But I think those parallel tracks allow us to flourish in some respects. They're so not restrictive. They're exploratory. They're like treasures to discover that. And God has provided some parameters for us to meet our core needs. I'm just kind of going off on this a little bit because it's a passion, but I'll let you respond.
Yeah. Well, and what you're saying is a great way for me to think back about kind of the core argument of my book is that there are certain motives that yield certain methods. And the motive of control and keeping everybody on a very, very rigid, narrow way is going to yield certain methods that would not come around if your motive was, I want you to love as deeply and broadly and generously as you can. And so I do think that the changing the motive for people who are deconstructing, for people who've been part of either a tradition that isn't true for them anymore, or one that is genuinely hurtful. Because I really want to be clear that there are some little C churches that are just hurting people left and right. They're set up by people who have power and prestige as their goal, as their motive. And so the methods are going to be hurtful. And that tends to be a lot of the folks that I end up talking to. But also, even when it hasn't been all, when it's more of a mixed bag of just humanity and the ways we hurt each other and the ways we bless each other, that we all have motives we know about and motives that we don't know about. Like, I didn't realize how much my kids' behavior mattered to me. I didn't want it to. I didn't, because I was raised with it mattering so much. I was like, no, we're going to be free to explore. But in my mind, I pictured that looking kind of like a little pixie child, running around and being cute and adorable. I didn't picture it being like my kids testing boundaries with language. Right. I didn't picture it being talking to the teacher for the 9 millionth time because they're doing that at school. And so I think that I had to reckon with my kind of hidden motives and the ways that they were sneaking in some reactivity and maybe being more harsh and shame-based than I ever thought I would be, because I hadn't fully understood how deeply I had been formed by this, or how much I'd still kind of held on to, and how much of my motive was to prove my parents wrong and to say, like, no, I can raise perfect children without all that harmful stuff, instead of pursuing Jesus might be different for us. And their behavioral journey is going to look different than mine, because we have different understandings of what Jesus is calling us to do.
Thank you for being honest about that, because I think you're putting words to maybe practically how this shows up for us. We don't realize we have certain motives until in real time, if we're open to learning in our own journeys, why we're responding a certain way when our kids, out of our control, have their own little will, their own little personalities, their own little needs, their own little DNA, their own mental health, all of the things.
Yes.
Their own environmental circumstances that are playing a role that we can't control. And so our response to that is telling us something. It's information that's helpful for us to dig in and to continue our own journey. So Bekah, I love I can hear your journalist mind. And I imagine when you as a little girl, you probably wanted to ask more questions, but in a system that didn't allow as much curiosity. And so by the time you got to the education system where you were trying, but I can see how God's built you this way, how he's helping you bring a voice to people who feel like they don't have a voice or have the same skill set. So let's end with this. We're talking with Bekah McNeel. Her book is Bringing Up Kids When Church Lets You Down, a guide for parents questioning their faith. What is, name me one thing you hope for the audience that reads this book at the end of the book? What's a nugget that you really hope they get at the end of all of this?
My greatest hope that I've said all along for people reading this book is that when they're finished reading it, they will go find someone else who's had a similar experience, someone they lost along the way, maybe, who was hurt, or who they wished that they could have asked more questions when they left the church or they went on a different path. My goal is that the book helps us find each other, because I think that's what happens when a lot of people are hurt, is that they become isolated. And so my hope is that people will find each other. And the nugget that I want them to take with that is that's reapproaching our relationships with grace and curiosity and openness and belonging is healing work. I dedicated the book to the healers. And I really do want people to read this and figure out and take from it maybe some freedoms that will allow them to heal in relationship and in community.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting the conversation, for being courageous to step out and put words to what a lot of people have experienced and to create maybe a place of belonging. And for those of you out there who are in our area, Living Wholehearted is a place where you can do that, where we have the professional counseling side, because a lot of this is trauma and it is recovery work that we've got to do on a deeper level. And then we have our executive coaches and our team who is coming alongside systems, trying to help us to have healthier relationships and to do our own work as leaders, so that way we aren't leaving a wake of pain and hurt in our organizations, in our families. None of us does this perfectly, but as Jeff would say, I'm going to quote you, it's a noble pursuit to shrink the integrity gap between what we say, what we preach, and how we're actually living, which is a piece of what you're bringing to the table, Bekah. So thank you for the work you're doing. And it's been a gift to be able to talk with you today.
Thank you, guys.
Bekah, will you tell, it's been great to have you. Will you tell our listeners where they go to find you and more resources from you?
My website, BekahMcNeel.com, is the kind of the clearinghouse for everything. There'll be links to social media, blog posts, where you can buy the book. It's all there.
Fantastic. That'll be in our show notes. Until next week, we hope that you'll be the leader that you would follow.
Well, really enjoyed that conversation we had with Bekah, and you appreciate her thoughtfulness, and you can appreciate also the story, the wounding part of her journey. And it's a journey. I mean, that's why we call it a spiritual journey. It's not a one and done, we're over.
I wish it was.
Sometimes it might be easier, right? Or it might be harder. But yeah, you can appreciate where it's coming from and her care to help others connect. The question I wanted to ask her that I didn't get to was really, as she's a parent, and as parents that mirror our relationship with God's, as our Heavenly Father, He parents us. There are things, there are boundaries, there are parameters that are loving and put in place for love and for safety and security, because it meets our needs. God knew that, and He created us as His creation as human beings, and He calls us to do that as parents as well. And so, to talk a little bit about some of those good things, right? And that
the safety and security rhythms
that a lot of pastors, that a lot of people who are sharing and trying to encourage in their systems. They got that right motive, but the methods get a little funky, right?
Yeah, let's get a little bit tangible. So I'm thinking about the parent who's going through their own journey. They're recognizing spiritual abuse or toxicity. Maybe we call it more toxic faith systems. And maybe some of it's church, but some of it's just their family of origin. It's the family system, the trauma that was brought in mixed with a little Jesus.
And we call that family theology.
Yeah, it gets a little funky. So that parent, right, you're going through your own stuff. And then you have these little ones who don't have that experience. And I think that's the important part for us is leading our children. Leadership's hard because you're holding your own stuff and the stuff of those you lead. So your kids have a different story. They have you as a parent, not your parents. Right. And so you're talking about what are those safety security systems. So we would say, and if you listen to Dear Mattsons, we have a little YouTube parenting series partnered with Christian Parenting, and there are 6-minute to 10-minute videos asking questions. And this is a common one: is do we force our kids to go to church? Or, I don't like none of the churches in our area. So what do we do? But at the end of the day, we are made as relational beings. Mm-hmm. We need each other to see who we are.
Yep.
And even though we love to reflect back to our kids, our understanding of God, we are a finite part of the greater community of capital C church, the history, the church fathers and mothers of the church that have created things that are good. We can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So having rhythms in our home and being a part of some faith community.
Oh gosh, these are so important.
Seasons.
Yeah, these are important. Like even just the invitation that we invited our kids into around Christmas, or around certain celebration moments, or traditions. The discovery of their faith, and and inviting them into this system is an invitation that is that's a loving invitation, a loving call. As long as we try to keep it as healthy as we can, but they may not find it otherwise. That's why God has called us to be part of His bigger picture of sharing about His story. Otherwise, others, they don't hear. And so we're invited into that process, and we don't just leave it to our kids to discover everything and whatever goes. I mean, that parenting style doesn't work either. That's unsafe as well. So there's just finding that balance, the beauty of that, the curiosity, and is so important. And God does provide beautiful guardrails, I think, and they're not there's not a million of them. There's just
simple.
Yeah. And because He loves us and He knows what's good for us. And He is our ultimate authority in that space. But,
and when you say authority,
that word is a trigger.
That's a trigger word. And so let's put it into the fact that safety and security, it's good that mom and dad, you decide when your kids are going to eat and if they're going to cross that street with or without you. We need a sense of something bigger than us. So when you say authority, there's also a submissive piece that every human being is desired to have. And oh my gosh, that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because there's a lot of brokenness in that word too.
I just wanted to acknowledge
submission. Yeah. No, it's so good.
We're throwing out all kinds of trigger words. Okay, let's just acknowledge that, everyone. Well, we just wanted to pop back on here to say the both and. It goes back to Bekah's point of flexibility. When I know that I'm getting really rigid and I think all or nothing comes from pain and trauma. All or nothing thinking in and of itself can be a result of trying to create our own control, right? I won't be hurt again. So when I can move into gray areas, and yet there are seasons that might look different. We might have to leave a church system because it's toxic. We might have to go through transition. That's okay. And there's seasons, but not to throw out. Everybody wants to leave organized religion, and yet there's a design. God created some sort of a design, and we want us to look at that too, the both and. So I think that's where you and I were left, and we wish we had Bekah here to continue the conversation.
Yeah, it's good. It was a good conversation in and of itself. But hopefully, these aftercare thoughts are just that. They're aftercare. Our minds considering what might have, what was missed, or what else came up,
or what it got us thinking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, well, we are so grateful. And again, there's so much pain in our own individual stories. And sometimes part of the healing journey is parsing it out and recognizing that unhealthy systems compartmentalize. We say it's only following God with our head, or it's only following God with our heart. So we forget our bodies. And part of this journey of becoming wholehearted is bringing all of who we are. He loves our mind, our heart, our body, our relationships.
Our soul, all of
our
those
soul.
things.
Oh, I forgot the soul.
Yeah.
So we're grateful to come alongside you. Hope that you're continuing to subscribe and be a part of this. We've got some incredible podcast interviews ahead, and are grateful for each of you who are coming along this journey with us.
This podcast is powered by Living Wholehearted, Courageous Girls, and the Christian Parenting Podcast Network. Thank you for joining us in this critical movement of shrinking our integrity gaps between what we preach and live.